somebody might move across the country and, just stuff happens, right? So you have to go into and plan your relationship as if you potentially someday could get divorced.
Hi, my name's Devin. Today I own several multi-million-dollar companies. We started with $5,000 in a credit card. I don't know the easy way. I only know the hard way.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Whiteboard Entrepreneur Podcast, where I give straightforward advice for the entrepreneur and all of us. I'm Devin Dickinson. Today I want to talk to you about a question that I got recently from a friend of mine, and it's a good friend. He's in a business relationship with a business partner, and they've been in business for 10, 12 years. And have really created quite a successful business. But they've reached a crossroads in their relationship where they've determined that they can and should no longer work together. And they want to figure out how to separate out the business. And so he was asking me just for some insight and advice, and if I had any experience with this. And I have had a little bit of experience with it here and there, and also dealt with some attorneys and different folks along the way. And I wanted to kind of explain to you my take on how I would deal with that if I was in his situation, because I think this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs deal with as they grow their company. Maybe the original ownership put together, just isn't working anymore, and people want to go different directions. Maybe they want to cash out. Maybe they just don't like each other anymore. And so it's very difficult. And a lot of times it's more difficult to kind of separate a business than it is even a marriage, right? And you can think of all the different components and everything that go into a business, and how do you separate them out, and how do you put value on them? And it becomes quite complex. So the first thing I would tell you is kind of go back to the beginning. If you're just in the very beginning and you have a choice to have a partner and not have a partner, I think if you have a choice and you have the means and ability, I think by all means, try to do a business without a partner. It will make your life a lot simpler. But oftentimes, really, that's not a reality. And I have partners in a lot of my businesses, and I enjoy my partners. But it doesn't mean it always works out. And so I think this is extremely important, kind of going back to the beginning. And like I said, if you have the option to not have one, my advice would be do it on your own. But let's say you just determine that, hey, no, I need a partner. There's a reason. This is going to be mutually beneficial. Then the very important thing is to sit down and write everything out from the very beginning. Like, write out clearly who gets paid what, whose responsibility is what, who owns what, right? Like, who has a right to say anything in the business, who wins. And, if it's a 50-50, partnership and you both, disagree, how do you determine, which partner wins the debate or decides which way to go, right? These are all things very important. And I would advise you to spend a little bit of money and have an attorney help you. Go online. You can use some AI to actually write up a contract if you want. You could also, look through templates, but spend time in the beginning and don't say like, no, we have an agreement, or, oh yeah, I have it in an email. No, actually take the time to have that conversation face to face, and then have you guys go through and read the bullet points that you agree on, right? Like, initial them, sign them, right? And at the very end, have a legit copy of the contract where you both sign, get it notarized, whatever you need to do to make you feel comfortable. But because someday there's a very good likelihood that, this is going to end up in a business divorce, right? Like, it's very likely. And again, even if you really like each other, right? Like, somebody might move across the country and, just stuff happens, right? So you have to go into and plan your relationship as if you potentially someday could get divorced. And that's why it's important to write this up in the very beginning. So when you write your contract, remember, it's not just about like how things are going to operate today, but also how you're going to settle and how you're going to separate if at any time, you each decide to go your separate ways. So that's my advice early on. However, a lot of you probably aren't in that situation and unfortunately didn't do that. And so now you're in a place where you got to figure out how to separate. And there's a few ways to go about this. And I was talking with my buddy, and I literally have seen this done where literally you sit in a room and you can bring an arbitrator, right? Someone else, maybe someone involved with the company, or maybe you both respect, or maybe your attorneys, or, you each get an attorney, or maybe just your corporate attorney that you have right now that literally can sit there and help to mediate between the two of you so that it becomes an amiable solution. And I've done this before, and I've seen it done where literally you just go through issue by issue, customer by customer, payroll, you figure out, who owes what expenses, you figure out who takes what cash, you figure out who ends up with the customers, you figure out who ends up with the assets, you figure out if someone ends up with both, how you provide a value and what that value is, and how they're going to be paid, right? And how they're going to exit, and what their responsibility is post-close, and all of these different things, right? So there is a way to do it where literally you just sit in the room and you have those very difficult conversations. Again, I would really recommend that you document all of it. If needed, have an attorney get involved, because oftentimes these can get hairy, because what happens sadly is it's not just the two partners. Like a lot of times the partners for the most part can see eye to eye, but then they go home and they have spouses to answer to, right? And listen, we all know what that's like, right? That, spouses have a right and an ear, and in a lot of states they have a right to, your asset as well. And that asset is the company. And so you want to make sure that you literally have something very legally, very binding. Everyone's in agreement, and you do things correctly. So that's one way. The other way to do it is, and this is a little more, it can be contentious, but I do think it's an incredibly professional and fair way to do it. If it's one of those things where you don't know how to, split the baby, if you will, the metaphor from Solomon, right? If you don't know how to divide up the company, what I've seen work is called a shotgun buyout agreement. And so the way that this works is it's going to sound a little complicated in the beginning, but I think you're going to get it. So what you do is you sit down with your partner and you say, listen, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to offer you, I will make you an offer. Let's assume that you're 50-50 owners in the company. And the one owner sits down with the other owner and says, listen, I'm going to make you an offer for the company. And then you're going to have 5 days to consider my offer. And either A, you have to take the offer, or B, you have to raise it by a predetermined amount. And so you might say that predetermined amount is, $100,000. You might say that predetermined amount is $500,000 or $1 million or whatever it is. But at the end of this, someone is going to own 100% of the assets of the company. Somebody's going to walk away with the company. Now, it's very important that you set the ground rules before you start the bidding, right? Because what you want to do is you want to say, hey, listen, the minimum bid has to be, whatever it is, $500,000, right? And then the minimum the amount of days that you have to respond is 5 days, 10 days, maybe a month, however long it is. And remember, this is super important, right? Because let's say someone comes and says, hey, I'll give you $5 million. And you're like, well, it's like, I don't want to sell this thing for $5 million, but I now have to raise $5,500,000, because if the raise amount is $500,000, you now have to figure out where you're going to get that $5.5 million from to counter the offer, right? So it's very important that you come up with the right rules and the right time frames and the right raise amount so that everybody's agreed. And this becomes a very fair way of assessing what something's worth. Now, again, there's a few things that can kind of put a wrinkle in this, right? Like, so if one person doesn't have any money and the other person does, they could certainly be bullied. into, paying for something that is, buying it for way less than it's worth because the person can't raise. And the other person, like I said, that's why it's important to determine the raise amount. So maybe the raise isn't $100,000 or $500,000. Maybe it's only $10,000 at a time or whatever that particular thing is. So you have to sit down and pre-agree that this is the right way to do the negotiation. And provided that you agree upon it, it's a very fair way to figure out the value of a company, right? So if you picture that you have a company and someone says, great, listen, I will go first. Maybe you flip a coin to figure out who the first person is to make the offer, right? But however you determine, let's say you flip a coin and say, all right, the first person is Devin. So Devin has to make an offer. So now I have to look at the company and go, what am I legitimately willing to give this person in cash to walk away to own this company? And I'd look and go, okay, well, that particular company I really like, and maybe I'm willing to start the bid at $3 million or whatever that is. And so, and we did say that the next raise has to be by $200,000, right? So if I bid $3 million and my partner does not come back and raise me by $200,000, I now have to stroke a check for $3 million and that person pays me the company. So it's a very real way to assess the value, because my partner could look at it and go, wow, $3 million, nice, but not nearly enough, right? So they would say, great, Devin, I'll raise it to 3.2 million. I go, okay, well, now I have to look and go, is this really worth $3.2 million? Because now for me, I have to buy it for how much? $3.4 million, right? So either A, I'm going to take $3.2 million, or B, I'm going to raise it to $3.4 million. So you really have to understand what the value of your company is and what you're willing to pay for it. And so let's say it goes back and forth several times. And finally, I decide I'm going to buy it from my partner for $4.5 million. And they say, fine, I will take the money because I do not want to pay $4.7 million for it. So I now, again, within the agreed time, right? So this is something you have to negotiate. How soon is that money due, and what is it payable in, right? Are they willing to take, is it all cash, or is it, hey, I'm willing to take half cash, half in payouts? But within these time frames, someone has to pay up, or there has to be a recourse as well. So this is called a shotgun buyout. I found it to be very effective for people that are equal partners, 50-50, and also both have access to liquidity and funds. And provided that they do, I really believe it's a very fair way to treat each other and to treat your partners. So this was advice I gave to my buddy. I hope this helps you. Again, if I could give you any advice, it's go back to the beginning. And again, maybe you started 2 years ago and you never wrote something, but hey, it's not too late. Write up your partnership agreement. And remember, in that partnership agreement, you don't want to just write how things are going to operate. You also want to write out how you're going to separate in the event that you ever decide to go your separate ways. I'm Devin. This is the Whiteboard Entrepreneur Podcast, and I know this is going to help you.